people talk about the orange bubble. And like, I think that this is one of the good parts of the orange bubble is that you go to Princeton to be like intellectually curious and to explore and not to have to think about money or like, how am I going to do this? That's not your job. Your job is not to think about how am I going to do this? Your job is to do it. And Princeton's job is to figure out how you're going to do it, who's going to pay for it. And they do a really good job at it and making sure that you don't really have to think about it. Even living off campus this semester, right? Princeton was conscious of the fact that like people were going to need to make like living arrangements. It's just a part of our philosophy. They upped financial aid. They made provisions so that students could afford to, sustain themselves when otherwise they would have been sustained by Princeton living on campus. And I think that that just goes to show the philosophy that like we have is that, you come here, your job is to grow, however that looks, and we'll take care of the rest.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meet Princeton, a podcast to introduce prospective students and their families to Princeton University, brought to you from the Office of Admission at Princeton. My name is Vivian Slee, and I'm a Senior Assistant Dean in the Office of Admission, and I'm so happy that you've tuned in to join us to hear from current student voices and others about our community and about what it's like to be a student at Princeton just now. As usual, we'll be joined by my co-host, Bryant Blunt, Assistant Dean and Manager of Strategic Communications in the Office of the Dean of Undergraduate Students, as well as our student guest from the class of 23 who comes from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He'll tell us about his Princeton experience so far, and also about his very first meeting with a class of 1963 alum who gave him his alumni interview. So go Tigers of 63. But first, we invited Sylvia Rodriguez, Associate Director of Undergraduate Financial Aid, to tell us more about Princeton's amazing financial aid program. It's a little unbelievable, but true, just how affordable Princeton can be for many students and their families. But I'll let Sylvia tell you more.
My name is Sylvia Rodriguez, and I'm an Associate Director in the Undergraduate Financial Aid Office, and I've been at Princeton for almost 7 years. At the core of our aid program, I think, are really the goals of affordability and access. Being able to play a part in ensuring that we are building a community of socioeconomically diverse students. By having a need-based aid program where a student's financial aid eligibility is determined using a review of family income and assets, we're really ensuring that a Princeton education is possible for students who otherwise couldn't afford it. I'd have to say that what I enjoy the most about my job is seeing the journey of students through Princeton. I meet them when they are sort of bright-eyed 18-year-olds, equal parts scared and excited to be at Princeton. And when I can see them graduate and I see that transformation and see them go out as really confident people with focus and drive, that's really rewarding. Need-based aid means we collect family income and asset information in order to make a determination regarding what that family can contribute toward a college education. No loan means that we do not package students with loans. While they are certainly an option, we do expect that between the family contribution that Princeton calculates and the university grant, that the cost of attendance will be covered. This no loan policy is unique to Princeton, and we were the first among our peers to move to this no loan model of packaging. We are committed to meeting the full demonstrated need of all students, regardless of citizenship, including DACA and undocumented students. So we do have a financial aid estimator on our website, which allows families to enter their tax information and receive an estimate of their financial aid eligibility. It does work best for families with straightforward tax situations, but it can provide all families an idea of what kinds of questions are asked on the Princeton financial aid application. So the estimator can help families work through multiple scenarios, such as having multiple children enrolled in college, or if one child is thinking of taking a gap year, the estimator can help families work through all of that. We award aid for the full year cost of attendance. And so what that includes is tuition, room, board, which is essentially the meal plan, It also includes an estimate of books and personal expenses. And for students who live 200 or more miles from the university, the cost of attendance also includes the estimated cost of 2 round trips from their home to the university. Students who are on financial aid who don't have comparable health insurance and have to sign up for the student health plan also receive a university grant to cover the cost of that plan. There's also a wonderful program called the Scholars Institute Fellows Program, or SIFP for short, that offers mentorship and co-curricular support to help our first generation and or low-income students navigate Princeton. The SIFP community provides students with peer-to-peer support. It provides them with academic enrichment opportunities and really with just a community of students to help our first generation and low-income students navigate any problems that they may be having on campus in a community that can just point them in the right direction whenever they have an issue. Study abroad is really a fantastic opportunity that we hope our students take advantage of. A study abroad semester is not treated any differently than if the student stayed at Princeton for that term. Sort of in simple terms, we like to tell students that their aid goes with them for their time away. I don't think that the pandemic has altered our commitment to access and affordability. I think that it's strengthened it. We've seen many families face unemployment or loss of income, things like furloughs, and we've worked alongside them to review them again for financial aid eligibility in order to be able to offer increases in grant aid. So it's been challenging for our office insofar as the volume that we've seen in a short period of time, but it's never challenged the commitment that we have and the commitment that our Board of Trustees reiterated earlier this year to ensuring that a Princeton education remains affordable and accessible to all of our students.
Hey there, Bryant. How's it going?
Pretty good, Vivian. How are you today?
I'm fine. How was your Thanksgiving?
Different, probably as most people would anticipate, but manageable. It was here on the East Coast, temperate and balmy, mid-60s, dry. Classic fall weather. There were no post-dinner couch naps with 15 other people mulling about.
That's right. No big family gatherings. Yeah, we celebrated outside. It was just nice to be outside at a table in that mild weather. I have a very important question for you, though.
Okay.
Did you bake any bread for Thanksgiving this year?
I'm low on flour right now, so...
And listeners, I mentioned the bread because Bryant is a very accomplished baker, as far as I can tell. I haven't actually sampled any of the bread, but I'm sure I will one day. And the bread that I've seen through our Zoom meetings just looks absolutely delicious.
If you put your mind to something in 6 months of concentrated study time, you can do a lot. That's
so true. That's very true. So we just heard from Sylvia Rodriguez, who's an associate director in the Office of Undergraduate Financial Aid. And she talked about financial aid and what that means at Princeton. And I think it's pretty amazing, really. Big question, I guess. Where does this money come from, financial aid?
So the two primary drivers, I think, of Princeton's ability to provide this, again, need-based, no-loan financial aid, it really is two places. One of those is this endowment, which you may have heard about if you talk about Princeton. A lot of that goes to support not just great programs at Princeton, but it goes to support the ability of students to be at Princeton. And another place that's comes from is really the generosity of Princeton alumni, friends, parents, and supporters of the institution who have contributed. That happens, again, in the form of those large-scale endowed funds that are managed and grow and support programs. But it's also supported by a program called Annual Giving, which is really an annual fund that fundraises. So, for example, this past year, the endowment grew, but it did not grow as much as it has in years past. People's circumstances changed based upon the economy and the pandemic. But at the same time, Princeton was able to flex to meet those needs. And that is due in no small part thanks to the generosity of those who supported the Annual Giving Fund.
Right. And I really like what Sylvia said when she mentioned the trustees' commitment to supporting students in terms of financial aid. You mentioned annual giving, and I'm one of the liaisons in my office for the alumni interviewers. along with my colleague, Helen Dorini. We speak to the alumni interviewers. We help to coordinate their work, and they are just unbelievable. They're like an army of angels. They're really fantastic. And students who may not be familiar with the university, it's their chance to meet somebody who went to Princeton when they do the alumni interview. And every student who applies to the university, after they submit their application, they're offered an alumni interview. This year, they'll all be virtual. They do this on a volunteer basis, which I also find extraordinary because they do so many of them and they work really hard at it. And we really appreciate their work. You know, alumni are just so involved in many different ways, from annual giving to interviews. Just a big shout out to our alums. Thank you. So, Bryant, have you ever been to Baton Rouge?
I've not. I think Louisiana is one of the states that is not on my list of places I've been, not even through an airport.
Oh, darn. I was hoping you'd have some really great story to tell me about your trip
It's
to
probably not on
Louisiana,
the
because I
podcast.
haven't been there either. So, but our student guest is from there. So I wonder if you would mind just introducing him.
Sure. So our student guest this week, Douglas Robbins, is a sophomore, member of the class of 2023, and from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Douglas is concentrating in the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, and he will be pursuing certificates in African American Studies and Values and Public Life. He's very active on campus. He serves as an Orange Key tour guide. He's a co-head advising fellow at Matriculate, peer representative to the honor committee, and active in Princeton's mock trial organization.
He doesn't quite talk about Princeton magic, but it sounds like a lot of his experience at Princeton has been
magical.
Pretty darn magical, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, and I have to say, I didn't know Douglas before we interviewed him, and his energy was so palpable. His love for the university was amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm so delighted that he was able to contribute to this episode.
And yet again, I think Douglas also showed part of his magic, right, was the magic of the alumni network, right, of the connections to people who you weren't even in class with, right, who may have walked the halls or the yards decades before you, but there's something that connects Princetonians.
Yeah.
Something special, something
There's
magic.
Another big shout out to our alums for that.
I'm Douglas. I'm a proud member of the class of 2023. I'm studying in the School of Public and International Affairs. I'm getting certificates in tentatively in African American Studies and also Values in Public Life. Born and raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I like to say it's a great place to say you're from. It's big enough that, you go places and, you're surrounded by strangers, but small enough that you'll always know like one person in the grocery store, one person at the restaurant, at the coffee shop, or whatever you're doing. It was a really nice place to grow up for the most part. I had parents that always encouraged me to just dream big. So for context, my parents did not go to places like Princeton. My mom went to Southern, which is an HBCU here in Louisiana.
HBCUs, historically black colleges.
And my dad was an untraditional college student, actually. So he didn't go to college, the traditional way. But when I was born, he said to my mom, they knew that they really wanted me to go to college. And he said that he couldn't expect for me to go to college if he didn't have a college degree himself. So my dad went back as like an adult and did like untraditional school. And my parents just always encouraged me to think outside of Louisiana. Now granted, like my parents were also of the mentality of we want this and we'll figure it out later. Like obviously like we were under this conception that like places like Princeton were really expensive. And like I remember like having those conversations like with my family, like even being younger, like I really want to go to a place like that, but we can't afford that. My family was always in the mentality, we'll figure it out. And then luckily we didn't have to figure it out just because of how we learned about how generous Princeton's financial aid is and how it ended up, it's just objectively, just with how generous it is, cheaper for me to go to Princeton than it is for me to go to my state school, which is crazy. Princeton is, I think, the perfect place to be an undergraduate for a multitude of reasons, especially like being an undergrad from an underrepresented background or like being an undergrad from just being an undergrad in general. I think that one, Princeton's size with a little under 6,000 undergraduates, it kind of has that Baton Rouge feel a little bit where like it's big enough where you'll be surrounded by people you don't know, but also small enough where you'll always be somewhere where you know someone. I went to a high school where I had great relationships with my teachers, and that is something that I have at Princeton as well. I always tell the story about my freshman fall. So last fall, I was in a class called Poverty in America. Amazing class. Loved it. It was with Matthew Desmond, who wrote the book Evicted, which I read in high school. He won the Pulitzer Prize for it. He's a MacArthur Genius Fellow. Just the preeminent expert and scholar on all work, related to poverty. And the fact that I was 18 years old in his precept and having him read my papers and my responses was crazy. I was really able to forge a relationship with Professor Desmond and get really awesome feedback on a lot of the work that I was doing. And I'm 18 from Louisiana, and that is just not something that my peers are experiencing. Or even this semester, somebody who I watched every morning when I got ready to go to school, Professor Glaude, Eddie Glaude, who's on Morning Joe almost, couple times a week, is my professor and my preceptor.
Large lectures or classes will break down into smaller classes during the week, which are led by professors or others helping them instruct the course.
And it's really crazy that this 19-year-old now, right, turning on the TV in the morning and seeing him comment about something, and then 3 hours later, sitting, in precept with him. That's crazy. And he's excited to be there. I think that college is very much sort of an equalizer. Everyone comes from different kinds of high schools, different kinds of teachers. People come to school with different skill sets. I think that for me, something that I, struggled with a little bit was, imposter syndrome a little bit, and being there and being this kid from Louisiana. And it felt like sometimes these kids around me all kind of had this trajectory and had it figured out when I was struggling to figure out how to take notes or how to, write a good paper. It was challenging, but, I had the support from my professors, from McGraw, from the Writing Center, from my college staff, just from everywhere to make that transition as seamless as it could be. On campus, I'm involved with mock trial, which is really awesome. We travel a lot. And so I think that a lot of people might think, oh my goodness, I can't afford to travel. I can't afford to buy the clothes that, I need for we have to dress up, to do mock trial, right? Princeton pays for it, which is something else that's really cool. Everything's covered. Princeton's acutely aware of that and will do whatever they can to make sure that you can participate. So whether that's you need a suit, to be able to participate in your tournament, or you need dance shoes if you're on a dance team. The organizations on campus, because that's part of our culture, right? Tend to already, have those funds set aside to be able to help those people that need it. And I think that's something that is very different about Princeton than it is about other schools. And I think that that's a barrier that people don't think of. I'm a tour guide with Orange Key, and I'm an advising fellow with Matriculate, which is a nonprofit that advises high-achieving, low-income high school students on their journey to applying to high graduation rate schools. And I am the co-head advising fellow, so which is really, really, really cool for me. I'm a proud firstie in First College, the best college, objectively the best college. Emphasis on that. That's me. That's what I do on campus. Princeton knows that people come from all different kinds of backgrounds. In my experience, I have not been sort of left out, whether that's socially, whether that's with extracurriculars, because of my background. Even meals, right? The food is so good at the dining halls, and there are so many dining halls that if you want to catch a meal with a friend, the default isn't let's go into town. It's let's meet at Woocox, or let's meet at Roma, or let's meet at Whitman, right? And the food is really delicious, so it's not it's not a barrier to hang out with people to go get food, because the norm is to go eat in a dining hall or go to late meal.
Late meals available to students if they miss regularly scheduled meals because of class or labs.
Go to places like Murray Dodge, right? Which gives out free cookies and free tea and free coffee.
Murray Dodge is a building that's home to the Office of Religious Life. In its basement is a lounge and cafe where cookies are baked daily and students study and convene.
That's another place to socialize where you don't have to go off campus and spend money. Field trips. I took a freshman seminar my first semester. We did so many field trips. It's one of my favorite classes. It was called Thrive Public Policy and Opportunity. I'm still very close with the professor. She's wonderful. most schools, if you're going on a field trip, right, they'd pay for you to like go on the field trip and like entry to like the museum and like not really like cover like the food you have to eat, right? But like us being on these field trips, Princeton paid for it all. And I think the really important distinction here too, like about what makes Princeton so special in that regard, is that it's not a handout. You don't feel like you're receiving a handout from the university, like in the sense that like, oh, I can't pay for this, but like they can. Princeton pays for everybody, pays for everything. And I think that, you know, especially for people that come from underrepresented backgrounds and people that come from like lower income backgrounds, like that is something that you don't have to worry about, which is really, really cool. Really, really, really cool. So I think regardless like of your background, like once like you're like admitted to Princeton and you become a part of that community, they make sure that you're academically like prepared and socially prepared and even prepared, like, you know, after you graduate, you know, advising, you know, even like I just met with a pre-law advisor last week. I don't know anybody that's, you know, nobody in my family has, you know, gone to law school, right? Like I don't know how to do that. And I met with, you know, a pre-law advisor and, you know, and was able to talk through exactly like what I needed to do and what, you know, so it's just like stuff like that, right? Like I just think that like Princeton, like overall just does a really good job of like meeting you where you are. So it's equitable. Princeton's alumni network, second to none. I talk about it all the time. It's one of the things I'm proudest of about Princeton. We have the tradition of, you know, you walk through Fitz-Randolph gates, like when you graduate. I like to, you know, joke that not joke, I'm serious. I say this on my tours. Your time at Princeton and your Princeton experience does not end when you walk through Fitz-Randolph gates when you graduate. It's only beginning. One example that I'll give is I will never forget. I was coming home from Princeton when the pandemic happened and I was in the airport. My bag was overstuffed because I packed and I had to leave and I didn't even think that it was going to be that heavy. And I got to the gate to check into my flight and the attendant was like, you have to pay $100. Your bag is overweight. And I was like, I need to go home. This is a global pandemic. I cannot pay $100 to get my stuff on this flight. And then she looked at me, she said, well, you're gonna have to throw some stuff away. And my jaw dropped and like I was in shock. And the stars were aligned because right behind me was a Princeton alum. And he saw that I went to Princeton, I was wearing my hoodie, and he paid the $100. And that's what our alumni is like. It's, you know, and I'll never forget that. There is no life after Princeton. There's only life with Princeton. In my alumni interview, I interviewed with someone who was class of 1963, who has been doing interviews forever. And, you know, even though he graduated from Princeton in 1963, and it was a very different place back then, you know, like he is still goes back to reunions almost every single year. That's something that like is really kind of foreign to people who don't, you know, who aren't like a part of our community, like how important reunions are and how they happen every single year. And we talked for 2 hours, you know, about, you know, how excited he was, you know, about Princeton, and about, you know, being able to sort of be a part of building a new generation of Princeton, like in like, you know, doing these interviews, which is really cool. And I just could tell that he bled black and orange. And that's everywhere. That's every alumni that I've talked to. Literally today, I went to get a coffee. That's one of the only things I do to get out the house now is get a coffee. And then, you know, and that's, you know, there's a lot you can do, right? And there was an alumni. I was wearing my Princeton mock trial sweater, like wearing my mask and my Princeton mock trial sweater. And there was somebody sitting wearing a Princeton sweatshirt and we made eye contact. And I was like, are you? And she was like, are you? And we literally talked for 30 minutes. And I was like, there are literally no alumni. Like what? Like I'm in Louisiana. Like I'm at home. And she, you know, graduated from Princeton in 2017. And like we bonded over that. Like there's just that shared experience. And like, you know, we exchanged contact info and, you know, and I got to know her and she got to know me. And like that is what makes Princeton so special is that, and I can't say this enough, that your time at Princeton does not end when you get your diploma. It only starts. Princeton's resilient. And I think that because of the community that we've built, because we have such a strong community, like on campus, like it is easier than in most places to sort of bring it off campus and to have that community, whether that's like on Zoom, to have that community, whether that's just, you know, keeping in touch with friends, keeping in touch with, you know, professors, even, you know, like I said, my professor, I touched on briefly, Professor Mann from my freshman seminar has contacted me multiple times just to check in, you know, and like, that's just like in the blood of who we are, like, is that we are a community. And even if we're not physically together, we are together and we've adapted. And it doesn't feel forced. Princeton's just a special place. And I just know that one day when I'm, 80 years old, like my interviewer, I'm going to be bleeding black and orange, just like him. So super excited about what my future holds with Princeton.
Mailbag. Welcome to the Mailbag. Meet Princeton wanted to make sure that we answered your questions about admission and financial aid, especially for those students who are considering applying to the university for this regular decision deadline, which is coming up on January 1st. This week, Eric from Darien, Connecticut, wrote to ask, why the pause in early decision? This is a great question, Eric, and we know that it is top of mind for many students, as we've heard from families and students and school counselors asking why Princeton decided to pause its single-choice early action program this year. Well, our decision was the result of discussion and consensus among our leadership that by having only one deadline for students this year, we'd help to level the playing field. So we'd help make it more fair for all students who want to apply to the university. How does that work, you may ask? Well, the pandemic has impacted students and families in so many ways, some of which we are only now beginning to see and to better understand. And with this in mind, we really wanted to give students the chance to get used to online learning, which most schools switch to, and to be able to submit to us a full fall semester of senior year grades, especially given that some students only had half a semester of grades from the second half of their junior year. So for those students who are applying to the university this fall, they might only have half a semester of grades from the spring in their junior year because that's when COVID hit. So in addition, we also wanted to give our colleagues in your school counseling offices more time to write those letters of recommendation and to prepare transcripts. So I hope that makes sense. And thank you very much for the question, Eric. We appreciate it. For our episodes to come, we hope that listeners will continue to submit such great questions to our mailbag found on our webpage on the admission website. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Meet Princeton. As I said earlier, this podcast was created with prospective students and their families in mind. And with that, I'd like to direct all of our listeners to our admission website at admission.princeton.edu. There you can watch, read, engage virtually, and learn more about Princeton University. Meet Princeton's audio engineer is Nick Dinoli of Orange Box Pictures. Mary Buckley and I, Vivian Slee, are executive producers. Bryant Blunt is our co-host and consultant, and Veronica Salazar is our editorial consultant. Original music was composed by Molly Truman, who is also our master sound designer and engineer from the class of 2024. We'd also like to give a special thanks and shout out to our guests, Sylvia Rodriguez and to Douglas Robbins, for their great contributions to this episode. And a big thank you, especially to our listeners, for tuning in. So wait a minute, Bryant, you didn't ask me what I made for Thanksgiving. I don't know if it's because you assumed that I did not cook.
You said you went to someone's house. You said you went to someone's house.
Yeah, but we went to a neighbor's house. We went to their garden, and I did contribute a few little things. We did apple pie. We did
So you do pies?
I do. I have to say key lime is my favorite.
Do you make key lime?
Favorite one to make. I love making key lime pie.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I do cook from time to time. All right. Well, this isn't a cooking show, though. We can talk about cooking.
Our next project
for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We'd like to leave you all now with an excerpt from the Princeton University Orchestra's 2019 Winter Preview Concert. Thank you so much again for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time on Meet Princeton.